wrote the Bible? I'm going to let you answer it for me when we finish these documents, all right? Document 2, we read. It's right there in your source paper. Document 2. The entire Psalms and Hebrew Torah were all Africans. They were born in Egypt and Ethiopia. Even the theory of monotheism, the belief of one God above all others, was taught in Egypt before the birth of Moses. Now, Doc Ben just gave us a lot to deal with there, didn't he? Now, you know what we just went through trying to get through Rogers. And Doc Ben is better than Rogers. So you know we're going to have to go through something to get through him now. Black Man Under Now, page 72 is where that's from. Good old Doc Ben, my main man there. Okay, I'm at document 2, and let's work with it. Now, much of the Old Testament as it appears in today's Bible, the very Bible that most black people have in their homes, was copied directly from ancient Cushite and Kemetic scrolls. We don't use the word Egypt. I just went over that in the last document. We don't use the word Ethiopia. And we'll discuss that why as we go on. We use the word Cush, is what the people call themselves, and Kemet, which is what the Egyptians call themselves. See, it was copied directly. That's what Ben said. Ben don't pull no punches. He says copied directly. Directly means what?
Word for word.
Straight from what they say, the horse's mouth. Word for word from ancient Cushite scrolls, which is ancient African scrolls. From the artwork and inscriptions of ancient Kemetic temples, every story that you find in the book of Genesis, whether it is Adam and Eve's story, and I go into that in detail in this book, African Genesis, and where it came from, whether it's the story of Cain and Abel, Noah and the flood, all of them are painted on the ancient temples in Africa and were there long before there was a Hebrew. Those stories existed with different names of different people, the same story. So Doc Ben says they were copied word for word. They just changed the name to fit the particular cultural and historical experience of the people who were doing the copying. The Hebrews were just another branch of Africans that had their own particular, just like you can go on the continent now and find over 2,000 different languages and traditions of how the world began and how creation came about. The Hebrews were just one of those traditions. The reason why they seem to be so important to us is because of all of our great literature. It was one of the few things that survived that we can now reclaim as our own, that the white man called his own for so many years. And one of the few of our historical documents that he let us have any access to, because he thought he had done such a thorough job of putting the image of white supremacy there and whitewashing it, that we could in no way possibly be able to go into this book he had rearranged now and find our history. Yet Nat Turner, an unlettered slave on a plantation, when they would taught him to do some reading out of this book, he went in there and found his history. And then as we began to grow, we went in there and found out, because our early scholars here, Rogers and many of the others, began to go to the Bible first. Ethiopia so stretched forth her hand to, and about Egypt and all those things, and they said, wait a minute, this is about us as a people. So he had no idea that we would now be able to take this book and get back to our history through it. That's why, that's the value that the book has to us. Now, it may have a value to you in terms of religion. That's up to you. I don't argue that. I'm talking about history today. That's the real value. That's why we shouldn't be arguing over different parts of it, because the book is confusing in its present state. There's no way in the world you can make sense out of it in its present state unless you have an understanding of our history and the original languages it was written in. All right? So he said it was copied word for word. They just changed the names and so forth. But the stories and all those things existed before they were written in the Bible. So when you hear them in Sunday school, you're hearing your history again, but you've been made to think, because on the Sunday school cards and all that, they got white people. They're certainly in the movies, they got white people, so you think you're studying white people's history when you're actually studying your own history. You know, isn't that something to do to a people? They're looking at their own history. But no, but here was the thing, though. They will take the pictures and the statues and put them in the museums, as they have them all over the world, and will say, these are Mediterranean Caucasians. And here you will have a man with the nose all the way around here, lips big, blowed up, everything, and say, this is a Mediterranean Caucasian. You're looking in a mirror at a picture of yourself, and they say, but that's not you. That's really me. That's not you. But the worst part about it is we say, oh, okay, that's true. That's the part about it. So when you're looking in the Bible, you're looking at a picture, you've been looking at a picture of yourself all this time. Abraham had to go to Egypt to get permission to settle in Palestine. Ethiopia had to come and save Israel's butt from being whipped by the Assyrians 2 or 3 times. So you're looking at your own history in there. And the children of Ham were the children of Mizraim and Put and Canaan and all that. We'll deal with that as we go on. All of them. Black land, Canaanites, black people, all these black people. As Dr. Justice used to say, to make it plain and simple when we were in the seminary, say all them ites that you, anytime you read ite in the Bible, are black folks. All them ites in there is black folks. Plain and simple. Isn't that something? All the time you're looking at your history, but somebody has confused us so much that we think we're looking at somebody else's history. So that's one of the joys of this. You can take this one book that you find in any hotel. That's where I got this one from. Any hotel, and teach your history out of it. Now we got to get these chicken-eating, mealy-mouthed preachers aware of that. And they can teach the history right out of here. Right out of here. Pork chop, that's right, pork chop eating preachers. Chicken-eating ones, all right, the pork chop eating. Now some of them say, but they figure, and they go to the seminary to study 4 years to get the BA. Because see, I went through the process, 2 years to get the master, another 2 years to become a doctor of divinity, DD. Just to learn all that about this one little old book here. One little old book they're supposed to be learning about. Of course, they learn about Shakespeare and some other stuff too, but just all that. And never get to know the book, so never get the history of the book. But there are some ministers that are, though, man. You'll be surprised. A lot of them that are on to that. But let me get back to this now. Let me get back to this document, man. I'm still trying to answer this question, who wrote the Bible? Maybe y'all will be able to tell me when I get finished. Anyway. When we study the historical background of the Bible, its languages and the geography of the lands from which it originated. See, one of the key things here is geography, the study of geography. You got to, because we tend to think that because when we came in contact with this Bible, when they brought us into slavery, when they brought us into captivity, we came in contact with it through the Portuguese, the Spanish, the English, the French or somebody. So we figure, and all them pictures they had in there, these Dutch people and all that in the Bible, and them family picture Bibles with all these big Dutch people and everything, we figured that must be where it is, up here in Europe somewhere. But the incidents are taking place over here, thousands of miles away there. So when you look at the geography, you automatically see you're dealing with the land. This little strip of land is attached to Africa. You can see very clearly it was attached to Africa. It wasn't until the split, it's still physically attached to it. It just depends upon who's in power, whether the Asian or the African, as to whether they're going to call it an Asian land or an African land. But it was attached to our Gatepool land, and still is. Just like Arabia, you can see where it fit right down there, just right neat, before there was a split in the earth, some 50 million years or so ago. So you can see that. So you're looking at, when you just look at the geography, it starts to get your mind straight, first of all. But then we used to say, well, you know, even them people over there ain't white, but them people over there now are not the original people, unless you go further south. And any of y'all been on the trip know that the further south you go down the Nile, or up the Nile, That's why I told you this map is turned upside down. Because all maps, and I got off track there, didn't I? All maps were created in ancient Archaebu land, and the particular nation of Kemet was the first maps, and they went according to the longest river, the mother of all rivers in the world, and which runs 4,160 some odd miles. The Hapi River, which they call the Nile River, and it runs south-north, not north-south. So therefore they said the gods came from and the founders of their land came from the south. And whenever they needed rejuvenation, and whenever they needed a revolution to take the land back from the Asians that was here in the Delta, because they never did penetrate in ancient times or past that first cataract, they always had to go south to get the armies to come out of there to drive them out and give the land back to the blacks. That's covered in the destruction of black civilization so thoroughly well. I don't think anyone has ever covered it as well as Dr. Williams did in this book, The Destruction of Black Civilization. Now, if that's the case, then the maps were, then what was on top then was that which related to the south, and what was on the bottom was the north. But when white folks got in power and started making the maps, where'd they come from? They came from the west. From the north. So who they gonna put on top? The north. So the map, actually, I got it turned upside down. Right side up is the way it's supposed to be, according to the running of the Nile. Even the map. And it took Van Sertima walked in they tell me, Van Sertima walked in the Kemeton Institute in Chicago, looked at the map the way they have the map right, stood there and looked at it, and he turned to Dr. Jacob Carruthers and Dr. Yusuf Ben Levi, and he said, "What is this?" They say, "It's the proper way the map should be." Van Sertima looked at him and said, "I'm already working on something. I can't deal with this right now." I walked right back out. It was because we saw the thing about it, you know, he came back and dealt with it, but the way he would take you out. Just something as simple as the map of the world. Putting it right. Put your history right. But I have to put it this way because I'm going to have trouble reading it. You're going to have trouble reading it. We have to make sure that our children, actually I had planned to, but I didn't see the space in here because I brought another map so I could put the right map up. Maybe I'll do that during break, put it up the right way. So when you put this map up to teach from so that the children can get familiar, you got to have another one with it up the right way. Y'all all right? Okay, that's dealing with just the geography of it now, all right? He says here that and we'll be dealing with that a little later on, that all of the Psalms were written from the sayings, teachings, the Psalms, all of the stuff you find in Genesis and Exodus, all of that. He said it came from Africans, and they were born in Kemet, in Africa. That's where they all came from. Now, he says the Christian Old Testament. We'll deal with the word Torah later on. There's several terminologies. I never like to raise a terminology without dealing with it. And there's several terminologies I want to deal with here. One is the word testament. Now that word testament, as we see it, and we start hearing angels sing, and they be fighting over, they can't even get right. This is supposed to be the unadulterated word of God with no mistakes in it, and the most holiest of all things ever written. And if you follow this, you can answer all your problems, yet they be fighting over which is the best in there, the Old or New Testament. Do they or do they not? Okay. If it is a unified body of belief, why do you have 580-something different Christian denominations alone? Alone. Again, I got to say that. Each one of them saying they got the only truth. So now Africans cannot go that route. I don't care what you believe. I'm not attacking your belief system. Believe what you want to, but you cannot be arrogant in your belief, and you cannot impose your belief on other people. If you have to impose it on somebody else and make them accept it, then it's not what it's made out to be. If it's all that good, what happens? When something good, what? You can't keep people away from it. If it's gold, you can't keep people away from trying to get something. But if you got to force it on them, then you have to rethink it. You have to rethink it. You can't think anything like that. Comes from the Greek word diatheke. Hope you can get my writing isn't the best. The Greek word diatheke, testament. This is where that word comes from. And what does it mean? It means a covenant, contract or agreement. The Old Testament was supposed to be the old agreement between God and the chosen people, quote unquote. And you're arrogant to say that you're one little, I mean, they were so insignificant. This little insignificant nation sitting down in the bottom part of Palestine going to be the chosen of God. But then everybody said that about themselves. But see, we have accepted them selling us that idea. Even when they were Africans, they were arrogant to say that, but then it was common for all people. Anywhere you went in the world, then each nation you went to would have said, God came here first. It was just natural for human beings because it demonstrated their personal what? Relationship with God or the Creator that they felt. So that there was no big thing. We're the ones that make it into a very serious thing now. They're the chosen people of God. So now the white ones who have taken power from the black ones, no matter what they do, it's all right. They can kill up a whole bunch of babies or anything there in Palestine and mistreat the Palestinians, but the chosen people of God. So they can do everything. They've been persecuted, so they can persecute from now on. See? That's something else. But it means contract or agreement is the Old Testament, and the New Testament is supposed to be a new contract or a new agreement brought in by Jesus, which is another story. Now, these words were first used in connection with what came to be known as the Bible, and we're going to find out what the Bible really is as we go on in these studies. These words were first used not by white folks even, but by black folks were the first to refer to them as the Old and New Testament. The very first people. Who were these black folks? The first one's name was T-E-R-T-U-L-L-I-A-N. We're going to take a break in a little bit. Y'all all right? Yeah. But no, I get to teaching. I'm like the rabbit in the briar patch now. We with you. You know, when you can't hang, let me know. Tertullian, both of Cartatus, which once again, not being able to pronounce our language, they called it Cartatus, the new city, the new founding in northern Al-Qabu land. They called it Carthage, because they couldn't say Cartatus. So you have to realize the Greeks could not speak well. They could not speak. I'm going to quote a white man for you after a while to really validate it. Now, I know y'all don't need that, but some people might need that validation, see, who says they couldn't speak. Cartatus. Tertullian, let me give you the date for him, 155 to 230 of the Common Era, because we don't say AD, we say Common Era, because not everybody's a Christian, not everybody predicates the date off of the birth of Jesus, which is off by 4 to 10 years anyway, but that's another story. 185 to 254 CE. These were both Common Era. Oh, O-R-I-G-E-N. Okay. Origin. These were both bishops in the church, the first church, ecclesia, place of meeting. The first church was a African church. Wasn't the Roman, wasn't Greek, or the Church of England, or anything. It was African. Christianity was spread in Africa first. It was only natural. It was a place in Jerusalem where the followers of Jesus started. Was there in Africa. So it went to Africa. When they were persecuted, they went into Africa. They couldn't get to nowhere else. They couldn't get to Rome anyplace. They went into Africa. That was the first Christian church, and it was a different type of Christianity than we know about today, but then that's another subject. It was these men, it was Tertullian and Origen, who first began to use the word testament, diatheke, from the Greek. And they used the Latin term because they were the ones who made Latin the language of the early Christian church. When the Europeans took it over and became the Roman church, when the Romans took it by force of arms, how did I say? By force of arms, by force of military power. When they took it by force of military power, the Latin language had been established as the language of the church at that time, and therefore in Europe, which had no scholarship prior to that, it became the language of scholars. Latin. What was the Latin language? The Latin language was a derivative from the Punic language. What was the Punic language? The Punic language was the language of Cartatus. It was the language used by Hannibal and the Africans from Cartatus. It was therefore an African language. So Latin came out of an African language, the Punic language. And I talk about that in my book, Holidays, African People and European Holidays, Genocide, book 2. So even the language that Christianity in the first Bibles were translated in other than Greek. Greek was first and then they went to Latin. The language was developed by Africans and instituted by an African bishop, Tertullian. And the idea of it being broken down into an Old and New Testament was developed by 2 African bishops. You can't get around it. No matter where you go, you're going to run into the African. African was in everything, everywhere. We didn't need anybody to come teach us about God. We didn't need anybody to come teach us about Jesus. We didn't need anybody to come teach us about anything. We already knew everything. Now, I know that sounds arrogant, but I have to say it that way because the rest of the world said they had to come teach us unlettered, unlearned savages. And that in order, and to pay for this education, we had to serve them. Slavery. But even though you went through all that slavery, look all you learned, look all we taught you. You ain't teach me nothing. I already knew it. I know every religion in the world. That's why yours didn't faze me. They'd seen Christianity before. There was no big thing with them. We convert them to Christianity, which means we therefore have civilized them. They knew these principles before you called them that. They just saw it. You would call them by another name, okay? If that's what it takes to get along with you white folks and to trade with you, we'll call them that name then. Islam came in. Those cats in the Sudan and those great empires and golden empire, we were the richest black folk in the world. Richest black. Wasn't no more gold nowhere in the world than in Africa. Everything you needed to make you rich was in Africa, in our cable land, in Western, where we came from. Say, in order to do trade with them, because they got the trade routes tied up here in the north and other places, if Islam say I accept there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet, Rasulullah, Muhammad is fine. If that's what it takes to do business. But I still believe in the ancient traditions. It's just another way of calling it something. And here they came, it was a big deal. We've Islamized all of Africa. They did not. Because the African had a different concept of Islam than the Eurasians and so-called Semitics that brought it in. Okay, so nobody taught us nothing. Nobody taught us nothing about God, and I've got to emphasize that. I know I don't have to emphasize it to you because most of y'all seem to be learned in these things, but we have to re-emphasize that to other black folks and to our children especially. Because see, that black folks argue you down about this Bible thing. And I mean, they get caught in that one dimension and you can't get their mind to expand beyond it. Because that's all they know. If they come through it as a Jehovah's Witness, that's the truth. There ain't no other truth. Ain't nothing else, can't be nothing. Because that's all they know. If they're Seventh-day Adventists, which I want, this is the truth, the last truth that is ever going to be taught. That's it. You got to get the whole world to accept this, then Jesus will come. Only. Islam, same thing. If you don't accept this, this is the only truth. That's one-dimensional. One-dimensional. There ain't no only truth. If there was one only truth, there would only be one kind of tree, one kind of food, one kind of river, one kind of thinking. If there's an only truth, everything in nature is an expression and a revelation of what? Truth. What is the word truth? From the Greek, aletheia, as we use in today's language, according to the facts. That's what the truth is. And the facts are what? Relative to a given time and situation. If there was only one set of facts, you wouldn't need a court of law. In the court of law, they claim, well, in our courts of law, the object was to get at the truth. That which according to the truth. If there was only one truth, you wouldn't need the darn court of law. It would just be obvious. So there must be many truths when you got to go to court and argue the situation back and forth like that and work it out till you get to that particular truth. Now, if I don't clear up anything else or help to clear up anything, because Dr. Beninoff has been trailblazing this for so long enough, if I don't help to clear up anything else in my lifetime, this one thing I want to clear up with black folk about this whole thing of the truth And this whole thing of only one way to God, and this whole thing, you either got to be Christian, this type of Christian, or this type of Muslim, or this type of Hebrew, or this type of this, or this type of that. You can be all of it. Because with the African, it's not either or. Why not all? It's a part of a total whole. The one. When you hear about the goddess this and the god that and all that, they were manifestations of the one. There was only one God to the African. Got to understand that. Is that clear? I couldn't overemphasize that enough, because that keeps so much destruction going on among us. So much. And we be putting energies into stuff that we don't need to be putting energies into. Okay, I'm trying to just teach, but you know I'm a preacher and I get caught into that too. Preach. Now, let me get, where's that document now? Let me get to finish with the teaching here. The other word I want to deal with here was monotheism in this document. Let's read the document again to put us back on track. Y'all help me with it. Somebody read it for me, please. Document 2. So we forgot where we were, huh? Okay, my sister, please.
Christian Old Testament are read direct copies of works written word for word from the African, Egyptian, Nubian, Cushite, Ethiopian, saints, and teachers. This should not be surprising to anyone, since Moses and most of the early Hebrews in Genesis and Exodus were all Africans. They were born in Egypt and Ethiopia. Even the theory of monotheism, the belief of one God above all others, was taught in Egypt before the birth of Moses. Black man of the Nile age 72, Dr. Yusuf.
Okay. Thank you very much. Since we're going to deal with those Hebrews being out of Egypt and Ethiopia as we go on. And we are going to take a break after this one, okay? Let me read from Dr. Williams on this thing about one God. Well, I got to take time on this because we have been taught that we were running around bowing down, worshiping any and everything, and it wasn't until the white man came with his elevated concept of the one God that Moses taught the world, that he came and gave this idea of the one God that we were now brought out of our abject heathenism and cannibalism to now be upright worshipers of the one true God, which everybody says they know better than the other. All right? Monotheism, the idea of one, from the Greek theist, theos, meaning God, theos, meaning God. And I told you I don't use the term God only as convenience because of the word dog spelled backwards. We usually say creator or divine intelligence. Theos, mono, Latin, one. Monotheism, one Godism is what it is. And then nobody had us before the Hebrews. And the Hebrews didn't understand until the white folks came along and taught them. All right, if you let the white man tell the story. And he's been telling the story for too damn long, if you get my drift. Time for us to tell the story. Tell me the story, Dr. Williams. Dr. Chancellor Williams, after 16 years of field studies in Africa, that's why he's blind today, studying with no lights, everything, 16 intensive years. Make sure he got the record right. This is a monumental work. You have to read The Destruction of Black Civilization, not once, every year of your life. If you live from now on, and you live 20 more years, and I hope you get more than that, you should have read the book 20 times. That book has to be read over and over. It is one of the most precious books ever written in the history of literature. And I'm not trying to sell you on no religion, not trying to sell you on no one person. However, I have to recognize the value of something for what it is. Dr. Ben's books are precious and must be read. All of them have to be read, and several times. However, this one has to be read at least once a year. At least once a year. And I'm going to read to him now about this one God concept that nobody had. Somebody had to come somewhere and teach the African. And because they brought us this great knowledge of the one God, we had to pay them back with pain, suffering, and slavery. We had to pay for this knowledge they brought us that we did not possess. Or did we? Let's read Dr. Williams now, page 94. Read here. Thebes and the role of religion. The proper word for Thebes, the Greeks called the city of Thebes the stronghold of the blacks down around the first cataract, first water rapids. In ancient Kemet, the proper word is Wose, the orb, because it was an orb which symbolized the sun that had ostrich feathers on it that the great kings carried, and was passed on to that line, and all of the pharaohs who were crowned in Thebes, all of the kings of Egypt or Kemet crowned in Thebes, had to also not only have the crook and the flail, they also had to have the orb with the wings on it. And in the Bible it says so beautifully that the Son of Righteousness, S-U-N, not S-O-N, will arise with healing in his wings. And we'll discuss that a little later as we go on. That's about that orb. O-R-B. It symbolized the sun, and that we were the people of the sun. We didn't worship the sun, we reverenced the sun. Naturally you would reverence the sun. First of all, the sun gave you your beautiful color. Secondly, the sun germinated the soil, which brought forth the food. A sunny day sure beats the hell out of a rainy day, and we experienced in the Nile Valley sunshine all the time. So the sun was of great value to us. So we saw the provision of Almighty God, the divine intelligence, providing for us through the what? The sun. So we had great reverence for the sun, because we were people of the sun. Very simple. Very simple. That's what that orb represented. Okay, and with the wings on it, we'll deal with it. That science that we had was so heavy and so complex. You and I could be 2-3 lifetimes, and we would only have just begun to understand it. So just in what we know today, look what it has done for us. We spent a lifetime of the pursuit of knowledge. We passed that torchlight on to our children and their children. Do you think he can go on in power much longer with that? Because just that knowledge alone will eradicate him eventually. Even if you never lifted a finger, and you have to, you got to do something, that knowledge alone would eradicate him from the earth, because he couldn't stand up under. Couldn't stand up under. I mean, not just having it, using it. If you apply that knowledge, he couldn't stand up under it. He wouldn't be able to handle it. Now, the role of religion in ancient Wose, Thebes, he said. Wose was the mother of cities. It's the oldest city that we know of so far in the world. We don't know exactly when it was built. He said it's been so long ago that it's back in the shadowy mist of history. We don't know the date. It is older than Rome. We can date the city of Rome. We can date the city of Athens in Greek. We can date London, certainly. Paris. But we cannot date Wose, the mother of cities. And where was the mother of cities? Huh? Kemet. And where was Kemet? Don't be afraid to speak up. Our cable land, which is misnomered Africa. I just want to make sure where this mother of cities was. And why is it important that we're talking about it now? And it was called, as it was called, was one of the chief centers of religion. Of what? In Africa. And I'm going to deal with that word religion in a minute. I'm going to deal with that as we go on to explain what that word really means. The blacks were a very religious people. This is before any white folk came in. We were already that way. So we didn't need anybody to bring us any knowledge of the Creator. We were already a very religious people. Already. And I can't overemphasize that. Already. Columbus had to come to teach you that, and we had to go to Africa and get you out. We were already that way. We didn't need anything you had to bring us. Absolutely nothing at all. Because many of us have it in our heads. I used to think that way. All right, so we went through slavery and everything, but then I wouldn't have knew about Jesus Christ, our Lord. And I wouldn't have known about these things I know today and have been able to study in college had they not brought me here, you see. Didn't need nothing, absolutely nothing that the white man had to offer. Now some scholars will not agree with me. Van Sermonheim would fall out over that something because he'd be saying, yeah, I say, as Dr. Bernard, they brought nothing. Nothing. We didn't need anything they had to offer. And if they had something we didn't have, if they'd have left us alone, we'd have found it anyway. We found everything else. We didn't need it. And not at them prices. Too high a price to pay. Even if I needed it, I didn't need it at that price. The blacks were very religious people. And quite a number of religious cities, each one under the special patronage of a god or goddess. And as I mentioned, these gods or goddesses were scientific symbols to explain the phenomena of nature. But I can't go into that now. I do cover that in detail in African Genesis there. Or any number of deities. The gods and goddesses of woe say were among the most important because the city was so, what? Important. Because religion to the Africans, dig this, was far more than ritual reflecting beliefs, but a reality. A what? Reflected in the actual way of life. Oh, I got to stop on that one. Oh, that is so beautiful. This man came, this creature came, I'm going to talk about it because I don't stop apologizing. I got to speak out if nobody else speak out. The white man is the worst creature that was ever on earth. His history says that. Now, you may have some who try to do right, and I give them credit for that and all that. However, them some are not going to make up for all the rest, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't care what people say, hatred versus, I'm talking history. I ain't saying nothing about hatred. I'm talking reality. And another thing is I'm exhausted. I'm speaking collectively. We're exhausted. Look at all the energy we need to give each other just to redeem us from what we're into. Now, if you give up all that love, what you going to have left? For somebody else. But I'm certainly not going to give it to him first before I give it to him. I ain't giving up nothing. I gave it. I paid dues I wasn't even supposed to pay. So I'm going to clear that up, all right? I'm getting old now. Like Dr. Ben said, my mouth don't know no Sunday. I'm going to talk the way I see it. If y'all may not come out and hear me no more, I just have to take that chance. But this creature came here with a false sense of Christianity, false sense of religion, in the name of the creator of the universe, destroyed in the most beautiful paradise. It was paradise when he got here. It was literally paradise when he arrived here. He destroyed it. The people then went to our land with its high culture civilization, destroyed that, and captured us and brought us here, all in the name of a religion. And as the scripture says, a religion that professes but denies the power thereof. It was therefore not a true religion. It was certainly not a spiritual religion, because a spiritual religion will not allow you to mistreat another human being. And I'm going to talk about Islam too. Those who profess to be Muslims and could go to Africa and other places and could enslave and sell the bodies of African people or any people, you didn't tell me you got no religion. You have nothing from the Creator. Because the one thing I know, if I don't know nothing else about the Creator, is that all things were created on the planet Earth to be free and to function within the context of their special and unique place on the earth. And that not one thing was to impose upon another. Granted, for the ecological balance, one animal preys upon another animal. But that is done in balance, and that is limited. It is not done in the name that one animal is inferior to another, that I need you to eat so I can continue to live. Now, if he said we came as predators, which they did, the only way that we could survive as a race was to bring you up under us, be honest. Not that I'm going to accept that, but we would at least fight him harder. But it didn't come that way. He said he came in the name of religion, which for us was a what? What is Dr. Clark say? A way of life. It was how you lived, how you treated one another. The oldest statement that we can find written in stone all over the temples of Africa, up and down the Nile, long before there was a Jesus, long before there was a Moses, long before there was any of those people, is the statement emblazoned in stone, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. All over Africa. That is the basis for religion. If you don't practice that, it ain't no religion. I don't care what kind of book you got. I don't care what you got. It means nothing if you do not treat other people the way you would want to be treated. It's as simple as that. When people run up in your face, what you got to have this, the Bible says here in the 2 Timothy, the word says, and you got to, and they get all up in your face with that. Ask them, say, let's close the book a minute. How do you feel about me as your brother or your sister? The Quran says we got to do that, and you get to speaking in the Arabic. I got to speak it in the Arabic because only holy if I speak it the Arabic. Okay, when you start speaking Arabic, close the book. How do you feel about me as a brother and sister? That's the final analysis of what kind of religion you got. That's the determining factor. Nothing else. The rest of it is philosophy. Live it if you want to, if you don't want to. It ain't worth fighting about. It may be what you need to carry you through. Fine, and you do it, and I'll fight for your right to practice the philosophy. But the only thing that I am really ultimately concerned about is how you're going to treat me, how you're going to treat other African people. That's all. It's as simple as that. Other than that, it ain't good religion. It's nothing. It has no power. It has no weight. Okay, y'all, let me get back to the teaching now, all right? Lord, this moving between preaching and teaching is hard. You don't know when one going to come and the other going to leave. Because religion to the African was far more than ritual reflecting belief, but a reality reflected in their actual way of life, religion from the earliest times became the dynamic force. The what? In the development of all the major aspects of black civilization. Why could they build something that nobody else can build today? The Pyramid of Giza, which cannot be duplicated by anybody in the world with all their laser technology. Nobody can duplicate it. You, black man and woman, built something on the Nile that nobody can duplicate. Nowhere in the world. Nowhere. You look at a black child and you tell them, your ancestors built something that can't nobody else build. Because they be talking, the white man is great. The white man got rocket ships. The white man got this. The white man got that. The white man can do anything. The white man got all this. He cannot build a pyramid. He cannot do it. But he couldn't do it. The greatest of all the technicians is they could not do it. He cannot do it. Therefore, if your ancestors built something that he cannot build, there is something in you that you can do that he cannot do, which means you can beat him. That's simple. That's plain. That's simple. Yes, my brother.
The ex-mayor of New York City, Mayor Koch, on a couple of occasions, like to say that his ancestors built the pyramid. Could you defend that?
Yes, I will. First of all, the Pyramid of Giza was built at least 2900 BCE. The first Hebrew, and let me write the date up there again, was Abraham, and we'll be discussing that, 1675 BCE. How much time difference is it between 2900 and 1675 BCE? And that wasn't the first pyramid, that was the Pyramid of Giza. The pyramid, the step pyramid of Saqqara built by Imhotep was built about 5700. man, not talking about a gleam in the eye. Say, I knew you before you were gleaming in your father's eye. It wasn't even a gleam in the eye. There's no comparison there. No, those Hebrews didn't, but we'll get to that as we go on about this Hebrew slavery thing. But let me finish with this thing. I'm trying to finish this thing on this one, on monotheism, and close out this first question and take a break. Okay, you with me? Whew, all right. There was a dynamic force where it made them build big stuff. These people built, some of those Kemetans were little. The Nubians were big, but the later Kemetans were little. They were always building this big stuff. The Ramesseum, 65 feet tall, granite. I know you've heard me talk about it before, but that's amazing. That's the hardest rock on the earth. They went up in there and chipped that out. They didn't just chip out a crude looking thing. They made all the delicate features and everything. 65 feet high. All over the Nile. Great big statue, all this big stuff. And to be ordered to build big, you have to do what? What made them think big? Dr. Ben said their religion was their dynamic force, their special relationship to the Creator. They had a special connection with, there's nobody built nothing like that. Even with the Empire State Building, everything is one building going up. Nobody has built a 65-foot anything in so-called modern times and made it look that good and chopped out all them little delicate things. And nobody has done that. Because they didn't have the spiritual force, the spiritual dynamic, the sense of the connection with the source of all light and knowledge in the universe, the divine intelligence, to do it. Okay, I'm coming down now. You with me? You all right? Okay, on page 95. Here scholars from foreign lands came to study. What are they talking about here? They're talking about in Kemet. And from here, religious ideas and architectural design spread abroad. They spread from Kemet to other places. They weren't brought to Kemet. They were sent forth from Kemet. They were exported, not imported. The early Greeks and Romans eagerly, they did what? Copied from both, reshaped them, and made them integral parts of quote-unquote original Western culture. During periods of decline or conquest, Europe and Asia seized and transported from Africa as much of the artifacts of its civilizations as they could. Cambyses, for example, that was in Persia, as early as the 6th century BC, hauled away over $1 million of precious historical materials from Wose alone. $1 million was a lot of money. $1 million was like 100 million back in them days, or like 100 million today, worth of materials. This one nation, Persia, when they invaded us, hauled off from one city over $1 million worth of materials, artifacts, knowledge, books from out of Africa. Cambyses was also one of the countless thousands, how many? Who invaded the tomb repositories of black history during each of the many periods of foreign invasion and foreign rule. Page 97, and we'll be finished with this one. Religion was not only, oh, here it is, the ancient religion that gave birth to science and learning, art, engineering, architecture, the resources for a national economy and political control. That same African religion was the mother of history, of writing, of music, the healing art, the song, and the dance. And he goes on to say on page 120, which I will not read now, that every time they would invade Africa and burn up these books and tear up these artifacts and tear up these temples and got all the plunder they could and hauled off with all the plunder and slaves they could, they would go away. They come back 100 years later, they had rebuilt the civilization better than it was when they first got there. This kept reoccurring. They asked themselves the questions, the Asians did. Why and how can they continue to rebuild these great civilizations like this every time they get torn up? And Dr. Williams said they found out what their secret was, their religion. And that's good that our religion made us do that today. And it did. It helped us get through, as off base as we were in some of the things, helped us through slavery and a lot of things. It was a religion that inspired Nat Turner and Harriet Tubman and Malcolm and King and others. But just think of that. And so what did they say? Well, the only way now to make sure that they can't build those institutes, build those civilizations up again, and that we can get in and get some power and rule them, is to become what? Priests in their religion. And once we get into their religion, we are legitimized in their culture. Once we're legitimized in their culture, we can take it over. It took them years to do it, but they did it. That's why you go sitting up in some church with some white man preaching to you, and your pastor, and your reverend, and your bishop, and your so forth and so on. That's the same thing they did in Egypt to take control. But then, they don't even have to have, they can have a black pork chop eating preacher standing up there, but they got the image of that white man behind him, which is his backup and his source of power that he keeps pointing to and referring to. The way they took over the civilization and weakened us was to take over the religion. Remember that, brothers and sisters. Let's close this out now. Answering the question, who wrote the Bible? Based on the two documents we have been discussing for this period of time and all of the history we have covered in this period of time, in answering the question, who wrote the Bible, what would be the logical answer?